Hey guys, what's up? It's Ripe again. In today's video, a homeowner association president claims that my gun range is part of the HOA and I don't own the property. Here is what happened. The title story starts like this. When you live on a big plot of land, sometimes you need to get creative in how you use it. And well, for me that meant using a chunk of it to create my own personal gun range to practice on. It was so much easier than having to go and find a place and hope that it wasn't full. This was just me and sometimes my buddies having a good time and practicing our shooting. The only thing that went wrong was when a new HOA entered the scene and the president was some kind of developer that clearly wanted things to appear a certain way. I did not want to be part of the HOA, but that did not stop the president from bothering me about my gun range every chance that he got. I cannot spit out word for word specifics since there were so many conversations, but they usually went the same. He would tell me that the gun range was bad for the neighborhood and I had to remove it. I would refuse, of course, and he would be giving some speech about the dangers of it and how I was harming the neighborhood. Then telling me how it was illegal and could get me sent to jail for having it. He also just assumed that since I was living on basically farmland, it meant I was a dumb farmer and did not have any other skills or knowledge to my life. After talking to me didn't do a damn thing, he actually started calling the police on me whenever he heard me using the gun range, saying that somebody was firing a gun in the neighborhood. They came and I showed the police around my gun range and showed them that I had a license for it. What the HOA president did not know and wouldn't know until later was that by day I was a lawyer. I knew my rights better than anybody else he could have picked on, and I knew there was nothing wrong with my gun range. Even some of you might be thinking it was dangerous for me to be shooting even on my own property. To have a gun range on my land, I had to follow a long list of rules that are all there for the safety of myself and people around me. I won't get into all of them, but just some revolve around distancing and direction of the shooting, as well as me being in an appropriate state to fire my weapon as if I was in a private gun range. Basically, even if I am on my own property, being drunk and handling my gun is not okay, at least where I live. The police can see I had done nothing wrong though, and every single time they are called, nothing happens to me. I won't lie, I was feeling a little bit cocky about the fact that I still had my range and he wasn't able to do anything about it. Perhaps I was a little too overconfident because I was thrown way off guard when I saw a group of men led by the HOA president dismantling my gun range. I was pissed and got right up into his face about what he was doing. Me, you cannot just march in here and think you can take apart my range. HOA president, this land is HOA property and you are encroaching on it with your personal range. This land is for the community and not just you because you live near it. Me, that's crap and you know it. It's fully on my land and the HOA does not own any of this property. HOA president, I'm gonna ask you once to walk away and let these men do their jobs. If you want to join the HOA and pitch for the land to be a community gun range, you are welcome to do that. But I say I doubt it will pass. This smug president really wanted to play this game with me, and now my gloves were off. I went into work and filed an immediate lawsuit against the HOA for destruction of property. He was gonna get a big surprise when he walked into court and found that I was one of the lawyers representing myself in the courtroom. I wanted to have another lawyer on my side so I could have somebody impartial also there, not to mention his name on the paperwork that HOA president got so he wouldn't know that I was the lawyer on this lawsuit. He looked so confused walking in and finding out that I was partially representing myself in this case. His first comment was trying to say that I couldn't do that because I was just a farmer and I had no legal experience. That was when the shoe dropped and he learned that I was one of the most respected lawyers in the area. I was gonna destroy any chance of him getting away with what he did to me and my property. Now, after years of being a lawyer, you get a feel for people's personalities and the best ways to deal with it. For somebody so full of themselves like the HOA president, it was best to actually let him talk as much as possible. He would dig himself into a hole before I would even need to lift a finger and do any work for my side of the case. That's exactly what he did with him telling the court that the HOA owned that part of the property and I was supposedly illegally using it as a gun range, despite having no paperwork or land evaluations to show if it was true or not. Meanwhile, on my side, I had everything I needed, including pictures I took of him having my gun range dismantled. I had proof that the land was my property and never belonged to the HOA in the first place. Furthermore, since I was not in the HOA, any other reasoning for him not wanting me to have a gun range was a moot point. I also presented the police report stating that I was following all the rules regarding my gun range and my license to operate them. Finally, I presented an estimated cost I received in order to restore my gun range to how it was before. No better or worse than it was before, he came along and had it destroyed. He had to pay that estimate to me as well as a massive fine for destroying the property to begin with. Not to mention getting in trouble for lying in court since he obviously knew the land belonged to me in the first place. Eventually admitting that he felt it gave the neighborhood a bad atmosphere and felt it needed to go under any circumstance possible. The HOA losing that much money to a lawsuit did not make people happy, since no plans for the money were ruined. He didn't have any way to put a good spin on this after already promising to use the land for other things with their money, instead of losing it all in a lawsuit to me for breaking the law. So then the HOA president was fired within a week and left a shell of a man he once was. Thinking that he could pull a fast one over me, thinking that there was no way a farmer could also be a lawyer and start a lawsuit to destroy his life. And yeah guys, if you still enjoy the HOA stories, please don't forget to like the video and maybe even drop a comment if you want to support me. Thank you so much in advance. This one is titled Public Parking Revenge. A few weeks ago, I was out in the city running some errands. I got to a little downtownish area where I stopped to get something to eat. I parked on a parking strip that was in some little neighborhood. There's restaurants and apartments everywhere, so I was lucky to find a spot. After getting my meal, I go back to my car and started to eat. About 5 minutes later, I hear honking. I look in my mirror and some guys on the street presumably honking at me. I look in my rear view and there's obviously no place to park. I cannot move up or back as I'm in between two cars. I ignore him, 5 minutes more pass and he is still there. He comes up to my window and knocks on it rudely. I roll it down and ask him what the F he wants. He asks how long I'm gonna be and that he needs to park there because it is right beside his home. Shocked at the entitlement, I ask him if this was public parking. He said yes and I told him to F off and shut the door on him. He kept swearing and insulting and eventually walked off. I didn't go into more detail because I don't think that I have to explain to a grown man why rudely asking somebody to move from a parking spot is not appropriate. If he had asked nicely, I might have considered. He had to go park across the street. I don't understand why he didn't do that before. Anyways, I got his license plate and I've been calling the city over the last 2 weeks every other day, complaining about somebody parking for too long. There's a 3-hour limit on public streets. He doesn't want to use the parking lot behind his apartment because it's too dirty, I assume. Last time I went back to the same area, I saw a ticket on his windshield. And the next one is titled, Karen is not sharing. One day I was walking through the city market with my mom and the quiet buzzing of the lights only slightly annoying. All seemed well and I decided to get one of the sample cookies from the bag. Seems perfectly normal, right? So I grabbed my cookie, which happened to be the last non-burnt one, as another family is coming into the back aisle. I'm not a particularly social person, so I started to walk away. And well, this family consisted of a mother and a son, the son being maybe 5 or 6 years old by my estimates, wearing a vibrant and disgusting shade of yellow. The mom had a typical Karen haircut and a bland red-colored sweater on over a bright white shirt and brand new looking skinny jeans. That did not sound like a good time to me. They realized that there aren't any more non-burnt cookies, which in my opinion shouldn't be a problem. Cookies are cookies, especially free ones. The child wails horrifically and notices that my cookie that I haven't yet taken a bite out of was not burnt. Wonderful observation skills, little Timmy. The mom approaches me and asks in a sickly sweet tone, one you can tell is obviously faked, if I would mind giving my cookie to her kid. I was not sure if the tone was from her having a headache from dealing with her kid or if she was not a nice person, but seeing as the kid was young, I chose to be nice and broke my cookie in half, offering one of the halves to the kid. Because I was not about to miss out on eating my cookie, nor was I about to grab another one, as I felt it would just be rude to the next person. The kid looked confused at this, which immediately felt off. The mom's face contorted from nice to confused to offended very quickly, as if not offering the entire cookie had somehow forsaken her entire family, and she stared at me like I was gonna sacrifice a goat in order to curse them. I naturally was confused and realizing what was happening a bit too late, backed away and tried walking away. The lady placed her hand on my shoulder, preventing me from walking away. I was maybe 12 at the time, so I was really small. She held out her other hand as if expecting me to just hand my cookie away. Let me once again state that I had tried to share, but Karen and her little hellspawn don't seem to understand the concept of sharing, evident by the atrocious wailing the child was releasing from the depths of the underworld itself. I hate the sounds of children crying. I managed to pull away from the iron grasp from this lady and then speed walked away. She marched up to me and tried to take the cookie from me. Before she could, a light bulb flickered on, before bursting in my head from the excitement to see the next levels of rage and profanities my plan was about to induce. I stuffed the entire cookie in my mouth. Now, these cookies were fairly big, bigger than the basic sugar cookies they usually give, so my mouth was stuffed. For a moment, Karen and her child are silent, stunned at what they had just witnessed. 10 seconds later, the gates of hell are ripped from their hinges. Karen exploded at me, screeching profanities at me, many of which I surprisingly had not heard before. I stood there, the smuggest grin on my little face as I slowly chewed on the cookie, continuing to rub salt in the wound until the profanities turned into indiscernible noises. Was it wrong of me to do so? Probably. Do I regret doing so? Absolutely not. After maybe 3 minutes of random sounds ejecting from the deep dark chasm this woman produced, she stopped to take a breath. I had swallowed the cookie by now and was getting tired of listening to the white noise this lady was projecting, so I began to walk away. "I'm not done with you," she yelled after me. Obviously, I chose to ignore her at this point and I was just done with her. As soon as I was out of the aisle, I booked it back to my mom and continued on like nothing had happened. And the next one is a story from r/Am I the Jerk. So background about my husband, he stays up late at night and has to wake up early to go to work. So when he gets home at 5, he has to get his 2-hour nap so he could both make up for lack of sleep and also be ready to stay up late to play with his console. He values his sleep and has one rule in the house that he enforces strictly, which is to not be interrupted while sleeping. He literally put a sign on the bedroom door saying, "Do not wake me up, under any circumstances, just no, unless someone is hurt or dead though." In this case, he said he still wouldn't be of much help anyway. The kids and I would sometimes waking him up for serious reasons and he got mad and started locking the door. I get no access to the room for 2 hours, but that's not the main problem. This past Tuesday, my 3-year-old son had hot oil spill on his hand while his 14-year-old sister was cooking. I heard him scream and saw that the oil was covering his hand and half of his arm. I brought the first aid kit, but he was in so much pain and his skin looked really bad. I rushed to wake my husband up. I kept knocking but got no response, so I tried to open it, but it was locked. I spent a while between knocking on the door, he had his phone turned off, and getting dressed after my daughter. I also then asked a neighbor to drive us to the hospital. I could not waste more time because my son was crying. The neighbor took us to the hospital and I couldn't help but feel livid the whole time. We got home and my husband was pacing around asking wherever we were and why I didn't answer texts. I blew up on him after I showed him our son's injury and told him that I pounded on the door to wake him up, but he said he had his earbuds on and did not hear a thing. I called him reckless and neglectful for ignoring a family emergency. He said I could say the same thing about myself for leaving our son unsupervised and causing him to get a burn. I stopped arguing and went to remove the bedroom door lock. He started yelling at me, saying that I had no right. I refused to respond, I just walked off to calm down. He did not stop complaining, calling me bossy and saying that by removing the lock I've destroyed his peace and quiet and caused him sleep deprivation. He is insisting that I put it back, but I refused. I could be wrong for what I've done, but I was frustrated and mad. Am I the a-hole? And yeah, Ripe Stars, let me know in the comments what you think about this story. Do you think that OP is the a-hole or not? Let me know. And a comment on Reddit said, "What the hell did I just read? Your husband takes an early evening nap just so he can play games and stay up late? Do your kids have any relationship with him? Because it sounds like he never sees them awake. Obviously, NTA. Comment number 2, not the a-hole. Accidents happen no matter how much you stay alert, but I don't believe your husband didn't hear you yelling. He chose to ignore you." And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. Neighbor let her brat park in my driveway repeatedly. I could not go to work. I got him towed. They called the cops on me for stealing their car. Less than 2 years ago, my wife and I moved into our first house together. Before this, we lived in an apartment for several years after we got married. Now, we do not have kids of our own yet, so maybe I'm a little biased, but it seems like some kids and parents these days are incredibly entitled and bratty. Our next door neighbors and their son especially were extremely entitled. And by the way, Ripe Stars, if you ever had to deal with entitled people in your own life, then please let us know in the comments. Anyway, the story starts shortly after we moved in. For starters, we had a decent sized driveway and it sat on the side of the house that was next to this particular neighbor. Mine and my wife's car could fit easily and we could fit up to 4 cars. Our next door neighbor was a small family, a husband and wife with their 2 sons. They had 3 cars in their driveway prior to us moving in. At first, this family was very friendly and it seemed like we could get along great. As a matter of fact, my wife seemed excited to make new friends so quickly right after moving into the neighborhood. However, her excitement quickly diminished. About a month and a half after we moved in, the father from next door came knocking on our door. He had come over to tell us that his 16-year-old son had just gotten his first car, a huge Ford F350 truck. At first I thought it was weird he would come over just to tell us this. I mean, that is great and all, I remember my first car, but my parents definitely did not go around the neighborhood telling everyone. Well, it quickly became obvious why he wanted to come over and tell us. He then asked us if his son could park his car in our driveway, as our driveway had a significant amount of space compared to theirs. While I enjoyed the company of these neighbors, I really did not want some chunky beefed up truck in my driveway. Not only that, but who asks that? In my opinion, there was no reason why they could not park the truck in the garage or street. After I had told them no, that I was not really comfortable with that, the father started whining on my doorstep and was complaining that they did not have room in their driveway or garage. They should have thought about that before they bought the truck. How and why was that my problem? Well, he did not like this answer. He actually told me straight to my face that he should be able to park in my driveway. At this point, I was starting to get pissed off. Seriously, it was not my problem that he bought a truck that was too big to park anywhere. I told him this in response, and we will let us just say that this was the end of the friendly relationship and the start of an ongoing war. Several days later, I came home to find that huge white truck sitting in my driveway blocking my wife's car. And my wife was actually standing on the porch next door, arguing with my neighbor. I had parked my own car on the street as I did not want to block my wife's car in along with the truck. I immediately went up to my neighbor and asked him what the hell his problem was. I told him that technically he was trespassing, but he did not even seem to give a damn. I really did not want any problems, and I found it extremely frustrating that these people were not respecting our rejection or our property. After a few minutes of pointless arguing, my wife and I headed back home and we noticed that the son was leaving in his car. We waited until he left and brought out our garbage cans to block the driveway. Well, the next morning when we woke up, we had seen that the garbage cans were moved and the truck was back in the driveway. I was so pissed off that I almost took off and started a fight with that son of a gun right then and there, but luckily for them, my wife stopped me. The truck disappeared, and few hours later, and I had gone over to another neighbor's house to tell them the story and see what we could do to get these a-holes to stop parking in our driveway. Our neighborhood was actually a part of an HOA, which luckily for us the house was well maintained, so they did not really bother us. And also, this neighbor suggested we get the HOA involved to see what we could do. However, a few more days went by and the truck was not in our driveway anymore. I was actually gaining hope that they had just decided to stop being a-holes, but of course that was not the case. One Monday morning, my wife was getting ready for work when she saw that the truck was back in the driveway, blocking not just her car, but my car too. She could not even get out of the driveway to go to work. Frustrated and pissed off, I called the police and within minutes they were at our door. I explained to them the situation and how my wife could not even go to work because her car was blocked in. Well, with the help of the police, we had called out a tow truck to remove the car from our driveway. Of course, while this was happening, both the father and son had come out causing a ruckus, screaming that we were stealing their car. Imagine having the balls to tell the police that we were stealing their car that was parked in our driveway against our will. It has been over a year since this happened, and I am thankful to say that we have a good bond now with our other neighbors. The next door neighbors actually traded in the truck for a smaller version just months after, and I'm assuming they would be sulking about it. We were able to file a trespassing report and document the whole incident, but we decided not to take it any further. We just wanted it in writing in case they behaved like this in the future, although I doubt they will because they have not spoken a word to us since then. Sometimes being an a-hole back is worth it. And Ripe stars personally, one thing I can really not understand is when parents buy their kids completely new cars when they are new drivers. Where I am from in Europe, that is really not common, and I'm curious, where you are from, is it common that parents buy new cars, at least if they can afford it, for their kids when they are new drivers? I gotta say, here in Thailand it also seems to be very common, because I know a lot of young Thais that have completely new cars, and it just baffles me. And with this, we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please check out my endless playlist, where you can find thousands of hours of content. In addition, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. Thank you so much in advance, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.